Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, How to Retain Your Employees and What to Do If You Lose Your Star Player, presented by Glassdoor and Robert Half. Please be sure to follow our conversation using the hashtag GDChat and the hashtag RHWebinars. I'm Katie Williams and I will be moderating today's event. I'm the manager at Glassdoor. And before I introduce our presenters, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. First of all lines are muted, so please type your questions in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll be sure to get to those questions at the end of the session. Also, we'll be sending out the presentation and the recording after the webinar is over. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters. We have Paul McDonald. He's the Senior Executive Director at Robert Half, and Allison Haddon, the Director of Brand Strategy at Glassdoor. And Paul and Allison are both going to give you a quick little bio about themselves before we get started. So take it away, Paul.
Thank you, Katie. Good day, everyone. Glad you could join us. I'm Paul McDonald. I'm a Senior Executive Director, as Katie mentioned, at Robert Half. Robert Half being a company that specializes in the placement of professionals in the area of accounting, finance, technology, marketing, creative, and high-end administrative staffing. I started my career with Robert Half back quite a while ago, 1984. I joined in the Boston office as a recruiter, and that was following a public accounting career with Price Waterhouse. In my roles within Robert Half, I've had various levels of responsibility, including I managed the Western U.S. operations for a period of time, managed the Robert Half Management Resources Division for about 10 years and been in my current role for the past 2 years. I'm originally, if you are trying to identify my accent, it's from upstate New York, where I'm from the Buffalo area. Thank you very much.
And I am Allison Haddon. I'm the Director of Brand Strategy here at Glassdoor. In my role, I am essentially responsible for driving brand recognition, awareness, and consistency across audiences and channels in building a corporate brand program at scale as we here at Glassdoor continue to expand into new international markets. In the last year, we've expanded outside the U.S. into the UK, France, and actually I'm really excited to announce that yesterday we launched in Germany. In my role here at Glassdoor, I spend a lot of time talking with employers about all the challenges that they face in this sort of modern recruiting world, and I speak as an industry resource on topics like, employer branding and recruitment marketing best practices, as well as job seeker and candidate behavior trends. I've been with Glassdoor for about 2.5 years now in a variety of sales and marketing leadership roles, and previously spent 9 years at the Active Network, which was based in San Diego, California, during its IPO in 2011. Very, very happy to be here today alongside Paul talking about one of my favorite topics, which is retaining top employees. So with that, I will turn it over to Paul to kick things off.
Thanks, Allison. Really appreciate it. And I think, you look at the current slide, and, I think many managers, as you can see on the right, have this headache that tends to set in when you hear the words, by the way, I'm leaving. It's a moment of panic when a star performer announces he or she's leaving. And we're going to try and dispel some of those panic feelings that you might be getting when you get that. And, look at it as that departures are not only an issue affecting your business and business, potentially top line and bottom line, they can also affect your employee morale on the negative side. And that can lead to the acceleration of other departures. It's a domino effect. So examining the reasons that the star employee leaves and what you can do to retain them prior to getting that balloon, by the way I'm leaving, is what the objective is today. Next slide, please, and what we'll cover today. We'll look, you're a good manager and you don't want your best employees to quit, obviously. So what can you do? Quite a few things. Why your star players may be departing, we'll dive into that. What are some of the signs the employee may be looking to leave you? We'll try and dive into that as well. Do you have a disaster plan? And what is your disaster plan? How to execute on that? And when we look at that and have looked at that in the past, it's many people say disaster plan. Well, yeah, I've got a recruiting plan, but we'll dive into a proactive way to execute even prior to the departure. We'll look at some of the winning tactics to retain the star employees, because obviously it's easier to have a good retention strategy in place from the time that person starts with you, and it's more cost effective to have a good retention strategy than it is to have a recruiting strategy, because it's easier to keep them. And at the end, we'll have some Q&A and time for your questions. So next slide, please. Why good employees quit? Have you noticed that there's been an uptick lately? Well, it's not too surprising if you look at the job market. It's a good, if not excellent, job market for job seekers. The unemployment rate in the U.S. is 5.6%, as reported for this past December by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. On a related note, there were almost 3 million jobs created in 2014, making it the best year for job growth since 1999. And the percentage of people quitting their positions has hovered in the past year at just under 2%, which, to kind of put that in, and quantify that, that's about 2.5 million quits per month. After a period of individuals hunkering down in 08, 09, 10, 2011, and, as things really got dark in the United States economically, people hunkered down and held on to the jobs that they had. We're starting to see an uptick in the quits on a per month basis because the job market is so good. Again, just more fuel to the departures that you're probably experiencing as an employer. Again, it adds up to a really confident job market for job seekers. And Glassdoor in quarter 3, 2014, in the confidence survey for employment, revealed that employees are feeling more confident in the job market, and that more so in the past than in the past 6 years. So they're really, I think that the 2015 we're going to see more of the same. So next slide, please. Here's a survey that we did at Robert Half, and we surveyed financial executives, CFOs, and people at the C-suite of finance, and asking, what's the top reason? They said good employees are leaving them, and inadequate salary and benefits was the clubhouse leader, if you look at the chart. And it's not surprising, because if you go back to what I said just a few minutes ago, and that is individuals, went through, if they've been with you and they went through the darkest day of the downturn, then we all had to, kind of do with less. We all had, maybe our salaries were frozen. In some instances, benefits have been deleted or reduced. Maybe there was some reassignments that took place within your organizational chart, and those reassignments had individuals taking less salary and less responsibility. So now with the job market better, individuals, again, to reinforce the reason why they're leaving, there's more job opportunities. And, other reasons that employees are most likely to quit, not only salary, but you can look at, limited opportunities for advancement. Maybe they're, unhappy with management. They feel overworked. There's not some recognition, and they're just not challenged with their job. So I think it's, again, backing up just reasons to be aware of, things that might be on the mind of your employees. And this is from a survey of the CFOs of their employees. They probably have heard this, not only from their peer group, but also from the employees during exit interviews. So next slide, and I'll turn it over to Allison.
Thanks, Paul. So sometimes beyond that gut feeling, right, there are going to be some signs that we might be aware of, but seem to forget when we're just sort of in the day-to-day minutia of our jobs that we want to bring up so that you might be served as sort of a trigger to recognize that one of your star employees might be considering leaving. So 5 of those signs that we're going to walk through: disengagement and behavioral changes. 2, a sudden interest in career development, which I'll talk about. 3, asking for information about previous projects, working on quantifying results in their current position or even in previous positions at the company. Another sign could be decreased interaction with managers. Again, I'll go through this. And one of my favorites, a new, more formal wardrobe. So again, these are 5 signs that might not grab your attention on their own, but if you start to see more than one of these exhibited by an employee, especially a star employee that's fairly predictable in terms of how they act and what their demeanor is around the office, you might be able to get in front of it and maybe even potentially prevent them from leaving if you do have a disaster plan in place. So walking through each one. So disengagement can include, a sudden increase in maybe potentially the number of errors in an employee's work, or maybe even being distracted during meetings. If you have a high performer who is always involved, is willing to fight for certain causes, is the person that's actively engaged in meetings and really drives conversation and is one of the ones that you go to for input, if all of a sudden those people start to sit back in meetings, if they're not driving the conversation like they typically are, or you're looking to them to provide feedback and they've gone silent, it might be something to just sort of have that little bell go off in your head and wonder, what is the level of engagement of that employee. Other behavioral changes, could be, a complainer potentially who all of a sudden is starting to go quiet, right? So if you have that person that, star performer or not, they are just the one that always has the question. It's the and but, and what about this, and what about that? The one that's just sort of a thorn in your side, even if they are that star player. If all of a sudden those, the complaints or the questioning or the engagement, again, is going down significantly and they're quiet, that's kind of cause for pause. Or you might have, one of your top performers who is more mild-mannered or more quiet. All of a sudden they're irritable or they're angry or they're quick to jump in ways that they aren't typically. And then, of course, lower productivity, right? If you've got that A player who always puts up, consistent 9s and 10s across the board, all of a sudden you're watching their performance dip. You're hearing from other people within the organization that, their project deliverables or their numbers just haven't been where they typically are. These are all the kinds of things that could be the sign of an employee beginning to give up or get frustrated, which is, one of the signs that they could be considering leaving. Another sign is, a sudden interest in career development. So you have an employee who all of a sudden is starting to take a look at whether or not they have a future at the company. They may be questioning whether or not there is a path for them in your organization. And all of a sudden, they are really actively engaged in conversation with you, with other managers, with even their peers about where they see themselves in the organization. Did they previously, not bring up these kinds of topics, and now all of a sudden they're really concerned with what their path looks like and when they might be up for a promotion and what that title might be. Are they expressing frustration over potentially a lack of development? Are they saying things like, I've always been looking for more mentoring, or I've been looking for support from my organization for continuing education, and, something they didn't bring up before now is coming up in conversation frequently. These are, again, signs that employees could be considering leaving, and I'll talk more about career development in a minute. 3, asking for information about previous projects. So what I mean by this is it could be a red flag if you've got an employee who's asking for information, be it, company stats, be it, results, performance metrics, taking more of a 30,000-foot view on basically their contributions at the company in their current position and maybe even in previous positions at the company. Basically, anything that might be a sign that they are crafting sort of a success story, right? Be it in the form of resume bullet points, or even what the story would sound like if they were talking to a recruiter or a headhunter about their results of their current company. It also could, though, just be, a proactive employee that's preparing for their annual review process, or someone that's just taking the time to, update their resume or update their LinkedIn profile. So just, be careful. Be careful not to jump too quickly, because it could be someone who is just starting to sort of re-engage in the process, or it could be the sign of an active job search. Again, all of these tips, sort of one-off, are probably not cause for alarm, but it's when you start to see a lot of these instances pile up that you should pause and see whether or not this employee might be on the path out the door. A third sign is asking for,
Allison, if I can just add on that, excuse me, just a thought that, what you said about this asking for information about previous projects could be also a sign that they're interested in posting into a position that might be available within the organization. And, so I would heed Allison's advice, and, one of these alone is not cause for complete alarm, but it might be cause for conversation when you're having your career mapping or monthly meeting with the employee one-on-one to ask them, what are their pushes and pulls, what are their wants and desires within your organization, and it might be revealed that they're interested in posting in for another position, and they're just gathering, project information about return on investment that they might have offered through the execution of a project they had in your department. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Paul. And also when we're saying considering leaving, it's also, I think, important to note, depending on the size of the firm or the organization, it may not be leaving the company altogether, but it could be leaving your team. It could be leaving your department. It could be leaving your region or even your country for another office that might be offered internationally at your company. We're really just talking about, at first here, the signs that someone who is on your team who you consider a valuable asset, these are the signs that say they may be looking for something different. And the goal is, as Paul brought up in the very beginning, to not be blindsided by this, to have a backup plan. And the backup plan and the sort of disaster plan, as Paul mentioned, begins with recognizing the potential signs that it might be the beginning of this process. So the fourth sign is decreased interaction with managers. I talked about this before. Again, we're looking for a drastic behavior change. So if we have a star performer, regardless of their demeanor, is someone who is actively involved in conversations with their managers, they're checking in, they're giving you updates, they're proactively, asking for more in terms of responsibility. You feel like even if the person may not be in your actual office, they could be in a virtual or working remotely, but regardless of where they are physically, you feel like this star player in the past, you've been pretty tied into what they're doing. It's been a close relationship from a professional standpoint, regardless of how often you see them. If all of a sudden that worker or that employee or that person on your team, those updates start to slow. Or if you were asked at any one time, what's that person working on? Or what are their highlights from the last month or the last quarter? Or what are some of the upcoming projects they're working on? If all of a sudden you go, that's interesting you ask, I actually haven't gotten a really good debrief from that employee recently. It's a reason to take a pause and look at that employee's level of engagement, because the interaction with managers is one of those key sort of tip-off points. Especially if you go sort of a step further and look at that employee and wonder whether or not they are maybe even avoiding you. So have they canceled numerous one-on-ones in a row? Again, if they were the ones that would, raise their hand or proactively check in with you, if those proactive check-ins are starting to drop off, it might be a good opportunity for you to, just sort of call a spade and casually, not aggressively, but casually check in with that employee that you care about and just say, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. Or You know, I used to get those updates from you, and I really appreciated them, even though I might not have responded. It was really helpful for me to know what you were working on and what you needed help with. How's everything going? Is everything okay? And I think that's the key to all of this. You know, Paul will talk about the disaster plan, but it's really when you start to see these signs, building the rapport with your star players and with your employees. It really begins with being transparent and open and honest, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And I think that begins with, you know, the personal rapport and relationship you have with your team. If you start to see one of these signs, instead of guessing or coming up with stories or jumping the gun, and when someone's starting to ask about results or performance metrics, assuming that they're shopping around for another position, just ask. Right? Just ask how things are going. Check in with them. It doesn't have to be a formal employee survey or a quarterly or, you know, biannual review for you to get the pulse on what your team members feel and how engaged they are in the process. So moving on a bit, we'll go to the last sign, and then I will turn it back to Paul. The last sign, and this is one of my favorites, it seems silly, but, you know, one of the signs could be a new, more formal wardrobe. So if you are in a casual work environment, or maybe, you know, like many of the tech startups that are here in San Francisco where Glassdoor is, if you've got, you know, an engineer who's typically coming into work every day in jeans, a hoodie, and sneaks, and that's just sort of his regular uniform, and you have a relaxed dress code at your office, and all of a sudden you recognize once or maybe even twice that he shows up or she shows up, you know, in khakis and a button-down shirt and dress shoes, that should be cause, and it's not Halloween, you might want to pause and just wonder for a minute, because that could be a sign that they're going on job interviews. Again, it sounds silly, but we're looking for any sort of dramatic shift from the sort of everyday behavior, everyday interaction, everyday engagement, and everyday appearance of those players on your team. I think good managers and good leaders are tapped into and engaged with their employees, so they're aware of kind of that regular behavior. The more in tune you are with your team, the more you're going to recognize some of these shifts, and the more prepared you'll be should you get into a place where that employee lets you know that they are leaving. So with that, I will turn it over to Paul to talk about what the heck you're going to do when your star employee potentially does go to you with that news. So take it away, Paul.
Sure. Thanks, Allison. I appreciate it. And I'm just going to press pause for a moment, and before I talk about the disaster plan, because I think it's important for us to go back to some of the survey data that we came up with, from CFOs and the employees themselves, and how to avert getting to a disaster situation if one of your good employees and valued employees leaves you. And that is, I mentioned it earlier, and that's a career mapping session. It's constant contact with your employees. It's having a regular meeting, scheduled meeting. It's on your calendar, and it's regularly conducted for all the people that report to you, to find out what they are after. I find that if constant communication, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes you're going to hear things that aren't going to please you, but at least it's going to keep you in touch with your employee. And it's going to help you not get to the disaster plan scenario where you're left without the key employee, or the employee that is just, we all have those individuals that they're too good to lose. And the replacement of those individuals are, we think it's a catastrophic event. So, I just urge you all, as I speak to many C-suite, many middle management individuals, the ones that are really good on the retention strategies are the ones that have really good communication with their employees, both formal, but then also it's the team building, even if they just go out for a pizza, or if they just go out bowling, or if they have some sort of community activity that they get involved with. We hear it quite often that those are the individuals that have the highest retention within their departments, and rarely lose the employee that they, either a star, an average performer, or even some of the poor performers, and that's just something that I thought I'd throw in there before we talk about the disaster plan, which is really, you know, when you get to that point where your star employee does quit, and, you know, there's 7 steps that we put forward here. The first one, you know, it might sound a little tongue-in-cheek to you, staying calm, but it's really important that if somebody does resign to you, your poise and the way you conduct yourself by receiving that news is really important, because that news, if you are a little reactive and show some anger during that, it can spread within your department on the informal, you know, gossip tree. If, you know, you look at, you know, the other one is conduct an exit interview, and I'm just going to go through the list real quickly here back on the previous slide. Thank you. You know, you might use some interim help to help you fill the gap. You might, you know, communicate with your staff, use your talent pipeline, address the workplace issues that are brought up, and develop succession plans. So I'm going to go through each one of these now. So next slide. Thank you. Don't overreact. Stay calm. You know, it's one of those things. Simply offering, you know, you're gonna be, the danger of extending a counteroffer is vast. It's proven that these individuals might leave you in the next year. Now, I say that now that, you know, there's a lot of talent that I'm hearing that if there's one thing that could be changed, many times the counteroffer works. So I'm not saying one size doesn't fit all, but the danger is history shows that those people leave you within 1 year if you extend a counteroffer and it's accepted. Now, if you've had a good relationship, and as those, you know, those 5 signs that were expressed by Allison in the previous slide, you know, those individuals, maybe they were your star performers. Maybe they're the ones that, you know, just went radio silent on you because maybe something's happening in their life. Maybe they don't have work-life balance. And there's a way for you to carve out, you know, a reduced workload, give them the same responsibility, but, you know, less hours, whatever that might be. It's not just about money all the time that people are leaving. So the rule of thumb is don't extend the counteroffer, but there are always exceptions to the rule, okay? And remember that not all exits are bad. What might seem catastrophic to you today may not be catastrophic in the end. We always think the worst. How are we going to do without this individual? But you might find yourself with a really solid performer coming to you, you know, through your network, through your recruiting efforts, and so forth. So look at it as an opportunity to change your team and maybe move your team to the next level. Next slide, please. Conducting an exit interview is really a good opportunity to learn what you and what your company and what your department can do better. For the best results and the most candid feedback, someone other than the employee's manager should conduct the exit interview. Often this is an HR rep, okay? So, you know, consistency on the questions you ask is also really important as well. You know, why are you leaving? What did you enjoy most about us in the job? What would have convinced you to stay if there was something that could be changed? Would you consider working for the company again? This is a really important question because we're seeing more boomerang hiring going on than we've seen in the previous, say, 5 years. Boomerang hiring, someone who left you 2 or 3 years ago, went and developed a skill set that was much sought after for them and their career development, but now is very much, you have a departure in your company, in your hierarchy, and you stay in touch with that employee. You've left on good terms 2 years ago. Now they boomerang back to you, come in at a higher position and potentially a higher compensation, okay? And how did you find your new job? That's a really good question to be asking as well. And that individual conducting the exit interview is really listening and taking the time and being thorough, okay? And the last thing I would say, too, on this is, conducting an exit interview. Don't wait till the last day to conduct this interview. It might be something that's, if they give you 2-week notice and you do the exit interview within the first couple days of receiving the notice, that information can be very valuable and may even, if it's, like I mentioned before, if it's a small change, if it's a very palatable change for the organization to make, it may lead to that employee staying, or at the very least, being treated with respect on their way leaving your organization. And they're always they're a great advertorial for you when they go someplace else, that you were being treated with respect, that you were, you are at that company. They treated me really nicely for the time I was there and my way out the door. So next slide, please. Finding interim help, a contractor, a temporary for the short term, really helps with morale with the existing, with your existing employees. It helps manage your workload, maintains the productivity in the wake of losing this employee. And you might find someone who's a contract worker or an interim professional, project worker, call it what you'd like. This person might be bringing to the table skills sought after that weren't in the existing or the leaving employee's background. And many times we're seeing that these interim workers are available for full-time hire, and the companies find that that's a great solution, not only on the short term to keep moving on the productivity scale, but also it could lead to full-time employment and fill the position that was just vacated. The next slide is be candid with your staff. Don't keep your existing employees in the dark. Silence is very damaging, and when a coworker leaves, it can hurt morale if not communicated clearly on the departure. So when you do get the departure notice, when you have had the disastrous, what you consider catastrophic resignation, after you pick yourself up off the deck, and you feel that soon after that conversation and resignation happens, communicate with your staff, and be in touch with them. Hold a town hall, hold a department meeting, hold a one-on-one with key members that might get jumpy, and they might be contemplating their own careers with you, and share as much information that is important to them. You don't have to share dirty laundry, but at the same time share as much as you're able for those in the town hall and on the one-on-ones. Next slide, please. This is really important too. So just accepting the fact that departures are going to happen. The job market is very good right now, if not excellent. Depends on your background. And so it's really in your best interest to develop a talent pipeline. The difference between really strong hiring managers and I'll say average or individuals that are challenged, that your talent pipeline is a 52-week-a-year proposition. Proactively developing that talent pipeline of your network, however you network. Could be LinkedIn, it could be Twitter, it could be any social media, okay? It could be past employees, it could be trade groups or industry groups, it could be conventions that you attend. I like all the above. That talent pipeline, 52 weeks a year, proactively, and you might say to yourself, well, I have no resignations that have happened. I have no vacancy. I'm fully staffed. Now is the time to build your talent pipeline. The savvy manager is time blocking on a weekly basis to work this pipeline and stay in touch with the talent. Half of HR managers said they have open positions for which they can't find candidates today. So that's on the reactive side. And 46% said hard to fill positions remain open for more than a quarter of a year. It doesn't look like it's getting any easier. Depending upon where you are within the United States or within this world, there's various levels of unemployment. and availability candidates. But we do know here in the U.S. at 5.6% unemployment, and for many of the professional positions that we recruit for, it's at half or less than half of that national average. Said differently, 3%, 2.5% is about the norm for many of the accounting, finance, IT, creative, and marketing positions in which we cover. So, and by the way, if you don't have in your pipeline or in your network a good recruiter, you should find one, okay, externally. Next slide, please. Addressing your workplace issues, okay? The exit interview conducted with your employee should really shed some light on the reasons that they're leaving, as we mentioned before. Take some time, really analyze the comments, their responses, and compare them with recent exit interviews to really get a beat on what is going on and look at the trend line of why people are leaving you. Reflect, talk about it as a management team, what changes can be made, what subtle changes can be made, what kind of investments can we make here or there, and really that's going to help you with your retention strategies and address what is going on in the minds of the individuals that are currently with you. And then the next slide is develop a succession plan.
You know what, Paul? I just wanted to hop in for a second. Just adding to that, when it comes to, and it kind of goes back to your original point about exit interviews and how critical they are that you need to listen and glean information from those. You know, if you think about it almost from a sales perspective, right? You know, you would say to salespeople that the most valuable piece of information you can get is why someone didn't buy from you, right? It's sort of like the interview that you have with a prospect that didn't choose you, and getting the information from them as to why they chose your competitor or why they decided to continue with status quo versus making a change and investing in you. That's the same exact thing that I think really applies to those that are leaving. Even if it does hurt and it does burn, sitting down and you know, being able to really listen to that employee who's leaving, understand what it was about another talent competitor that was more attractive than staying with you, from my perspective, is one of the most important conversations you can have that holds the most interesting, valuable information that can help you as a professional, as a manager, but then also your organization, if you document it the right way from an exit interview standpoint, the ways in which you can really have a huge impact on your org.
Yeah, great comment. I 100% agree with you. So in looking at the succession plan, you know, having a good talent pipeline is one thing, but a truly great manager develops a really solid succession plan. I used to call it the lifeboat drill. It's like if something were to happen to me, who's next in line? Who's in line with that? Who's gonna take the, you know, be in the lifeboat with me to really move to the next level? You know, having replacements in mind for all key players on your team is really important. Play out the worst case scenarios, and playing them out can be, you know, less reactive and again, more in the proactive management level. Nothing truly provocative here. You probably heard it in your management classes. And I think sometimes the theory of listening to it in classes and then when you get into the disaster plan and disaster catastrophic event of losing key employees, sometimes we forget that. But being proactive in your planning on this. I think what's really important too is that look at everybody as a star, at a potential star. Maybe there's some diamonds in the rough. Maybe there's some individuals with a little augmentation and training can move to the next level. Do they have mentors? Do they have partners that can, you know, as you do their gap analysis with your employees, are there ways, are there strategies, tactics that you can execute upon to move these average people to the high potential star category? Are there individuals that are poor employees that you have on a performance plan that are really coming to light right now? And how can I move these people forward? How can I take a gamble on them? Are they a cultural fit with me? And if so, you know, cultural fit with the organization, I mean, do they really fit what I'm trying to accomplish within my organization and company? And as a result, with a little bit of training, we can move them to the next level. It really is, the succession plan we can spend a whole webinar just on that. But it's really urging you to take a solid look at that now before you get the resignation. Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Allison.
Thanks, Paul. That was great. So let's talk about some really great tactical strategies for retaining employees, right? So it's all about getting in front of it. Winning employee engagement tactics to retain talent. And I'm going to go into each one of these, so I'm going to go through this part quickly. The six that I'm going to talk about, Paul and I, the first one's going to be about offering competitive salaries. Two is going to be knowing what matters most, and I think it'll be interesting. I'll go through that in a minute. Three is tracking employee sentiment. What I mean by this is having a good pulse on what your employees actually think about your company, making sure that the perception versus reality, the gap isn't too large, and then sort of tracking that over time. Fourth is communicating clearly. Then focusing on career development is one of the tactics, and then recognizing great work. So I'm going to go into each one, Paul and I. So the first one, offer competitive salaries. People might think of this one first, right? It's really important that you know what your people are worth. And remembering that, insufficient pay is still, regardless of industry, the top reason why good employees typically choose to leave. It's not the only reason, right? But it is typically the more dominant or the top or the number one reason why they say they are leaving. It's important that you know what your competitors are paying. What is the fair market value in your industry for that level in your region for that position? And are you keeping pace? Robert Half has, salary guides. I know they published the annual industry-wide salary guide so that you can be aware on some of the broader trends. And then if you want to get even more granular and more specific, Glassdoor, we have profiles on over 350,000 companies worldwide, and that includes searchable salary information for specific companies across different positions, across companies, and then even industries, and you can even look at it by region, by country, even by office at certain large global multinationals. So use the resources that are out there to ensure that you know what your people are worth. It's not something that you do once and then you check it again in 5 or 10 years. It's something that should happen on a regular basis. You should have an operating rhythm of reviewing, tracking, and then communicating that to your broader executive team to ensure that, those employees that you want to retain are getting paid what they're worth, and you guys are not too far behind the curve when it comes to what else is out there. The second thing, and this is interesting because I mentioned, yes, it's about compensation. If you look on the right, in our most recent member survey, and we have over 26 million members on Glassdoor right now, in our last member survey, we talked to those that are on Glassdoor and asked them, what are the biggest considerations that you take into account before you accept a job offer? One, as I just mentioned, is salary and compensation, but look at the other ones. Close second was career growth opportunities. Despite the perception that we have a lot of job hoppers today, and maybe the millennial generation are the ones that, are always looking for the bigger, better deal. When it comes down to it, the research and the data shows that today's job seekers, they would like to stay at one organization. In order to do that, though, they know that they need to grow and develop. And if they can't do that underneath the umbrella of one organization, they are going to look for that growth elsewhere. So it's important that you recognize salary and compensation might be first, but a close second is the opportunity to grow and develop and get further education within the same organization where they are. Third is work-life balance. This is coming up more and more. We hear about this today. Understanding what some of the benefits are, and maybe beyond just traditional medical, dental, vision, insurance benefits, we're hearing people ask about pet-friendly workplaces and maternity and paternity leaves, and paid time off, or maybe even unlimited PTO, like we have here at Glassdoor and many other startups here in the Bay Area. So it's important that you recognize that this is the kind of stuff that's important. On a company's Glassdoor profile, we have a new benefits feature that enables companies to sign up for a free employer account and actually talk about the different types of benefits that they offer, even the benefits by office or by region or by country, because sometimes it differs. And then it also gives employees and former employees the opportunity to rate those benefits at the company and say, actually, we feel like the benefits that are offered here at company X far outweigh other companies that are, in that similar talent pool. 4 is location and commute. That's going to be important to someone who is looking at a job offer or considering one. And then 5 is company cultures and values. And again, when we think about the information that should be on your career site that's speaking to potential candidates and your current employees today, it's important that you have that same information on your Glassdoor profile, on other channels that are out there, because this is the type of information that is most important to the people who are looking to stay at your company and the people that are looking to join your company. And on the left, and just for time's sake, I won't go through it, but you can see there the results from our survey as well. The differences in terms of money and culture by different professions and different industries. And you can see there, it's incredibly interesting that 66% of healthcare professionals are likely to accept less money to work at a company that's got a great culture. And sales professionals say that 78% of them would accept less money to work at a company that sells a product or a service that's really compelling. So again, it's really important that, yes, salary and compensation will likely rise to the top, but it is not the only player in the game. There are specific edge cases and even specific industries and professionals where money is not the only thing that matters. And if anything, there are many people in many industries that would be willing to take less if some of those other things like career growth, work-life balance, the products and services that are being sold, the company culture and values, if those were taken care of and kind of rose to the top versus just salary and compensation. Tracking employee sentiment, so keeping tabs on how your employees are feeling, really matters when it comes to, engaging with your employees and hopefully keeping those star players around. You've got the opportunity, as Paul talked about, it's too late. If you weren't aware of any of this, that means you probably weren't tapped into your team the way that you should be as a manager, as a leader. Don't just wait for those exit interviews, right, or the annual reviews to have those big picture discussions. Glassdoor also offers the opportunity for organizations to keep tabs on what their employees think about the company. With over, 6.5 million reviews from those 26 million members on Glassdoor, I would encourage every person on this webinar to take the opportunity. It doesn't cost anything. Go, look up your company on Glassdoor, see what people are saying about it, and start to use it as sort of a means for communication and a starting point to sort of begin to track employee sentiment. And if you have a free employer account on Glassdoor, you'll also have the opportunity to download some free reports and analytics that will help you track this as well, and you can share it with your teams. And then if we're looking at engaging your employees, if you engage them, obviously they're more likely to stick around. It's all we're hearing about today. You can foster this culture of engagement by encouraging really organizational transparency that begins from the top. It's interesting that, today, when we're talking about open and honest communication, the internet, social media, the conversation is going not just, offline in the office, but it's happening online as well. And we would encourage you to have your employees actually post reviews about the company on Glassdoor. This is the kind of transparency and sort of openness, this two-way conversation that employees want today, and especially job seekers that are looking to join your organization. It's what they're looking for as well. There was a Weber-Shandwick study in last year, 2014, and they said that employees that have socially encouraging employers are significantly more likely actually to even boost sales. So if you think, oh, I'm afraid of encouraging my employees to get involved in the conversation online, the research shows that actually those employees, because they become evangelists for your company, they become brand ambassadors. They not only help you recruit other talent, they also can contribute to better sales because they're engaged in the conversation and because you're promoting this open, transparent environment. Additionally, when you're looking at Glassdoor and people who are submitting reviews about your company, it's really important too that you get involved in the conversation, and we watch when it comes to best practices. employers engage in the conversation openly on Glassdoor and actually respond to reviews. As long as you have a free employer account, you can respond to those comments publicly and engage your employees in this transparent two-way conversation. And in our most recent member survey, 69% of those 26 million members that were surveyed said that the perception of an employer improved when they saw someone from the company, an executive or just a representative of the company, respond to reviews. Because again, it says I care at a broader company or corporate level, just as a manager or a leader stopping that employee that shows one of those signs that they might be thinking about leaving and saying, are you okay? Is there anything I can help with? What's going on? You seem a little off, or things seem a little bit weird. It's basically that engagement at a much, much higher corporate level that today's employees want to see, and really shows that kind of engagement that they're looking for. And then I'm going to turn it over to Paul to talk about the focus on career development.
Yep, and just kind of a comment by me on your engagement of your employees. I think you guys, if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, if you heard my introductory comments about my background, I fit the boomer category. I think many boomers, I'll speak to you right now if you're on the line. It used to be that we grew up in management trying to squelch the rumor mill within our departments. I think we have to embrace what's going on. Further to comments what Allison was making about engaging your employee, having transparency in the social media. It's going to happen with or without us. And we have to, by being proactively engaged in the conversation, being able to respond back to what you're seeing in either Glassdoors of the world or in social media or other sites, I think you just have to, it fosters a really transparent environment. So we have to be actively involved is my comment and advice. So if you focus on the career development, and I know we're running up against the clock, so I'm going to look at this. Some of these comments I've made already, but you know, defining a career path and promoting from within always helps with morale and retention strategies. Offering assignments and projects that enable the employees to put their skills to use, but also garner new skills and develop their career, their internal resume for you, and also you know, having them flex their muscles that they may have gained from other sources, and then you know, using it within your organization. Offering them opportunities to go to conferences, online learning, webinars such as this, lunch and learns, bringing in a speaker or two, mentoring program, and then I'll say, you know, again, career development, you might not think about it, but having a team building event that might be related to career building, but also career development, but it also will help that with the morale factor as well. Just a few quick ideas for you. Next slide would be recognizing great work. Recognition is so important, and it's so easy to do. We all heard about individuals that, you know, used to walk around the staff floors, walk around, and just managers that just get the personal touch, get involved with the employees, but then also if there's a job well done, to just spend the time privately as well as publicly recognizing them, acknowledging the job well done. You know, as we say here, at the individual and the team level. Sometimes in writing, if it's a remote workforce, you know, the email recognition is a great way. A teleconference is a great way to, you know, just help foster that sense of appreciation and build that community, which is so important. And it's the on-the-spot recognition of just a simple, you know, gift card. You know, maybe they like coffee, so you give them a coffee card, you know, to one of our, the coffee companies. Event tickets, if that's within your budget. Or just, you know, a personal thanks. If they're real star performers, then maybe, and you're a manager, maybe it's and you're in sales, maybe it's a, you know, star performers lunch once a quarter, where, you know, you take them out just for a quick meal, a sandwich or a salad, and away you go. So it's just a great way to recognize great work and build morale, and it fosters the team, and it fosters retention. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Katie with remaining time for any questions that we might have.
Thanks, Paul. All right, it looks like we have a few minutes for questions, about 5 minutes. And I've gotten a lot of questions about the slide deck and the recording, so we'll be sending those out after the webinar. So please look out for an email from Glassdoor or an email from Robert Half, and you'll be getting those in your inbox. So the first question I have here is probably for Paul, and it's, do you have any thoughts on conducting exit interviews of individuals that are involuntarily terminated?
Who'd that come from?
It came from Janelle D.
Well, my advice is, one, whatever your company policy is first, you got to execute upon that. Two, as we said earlier, if you don't have a policy, then it's really good for that exit interview to be conducted by with HR person, and to have a number. Maybe it's your policy may be or may not be to have 2 people in the room listening with that involuntary termination. But just a few things off the top of my head. Whatever your legal department, whatever is company policy, should be followed. And usually companies have the involuntary termination policy of exit interviews.
Great. All right, it looks like we got another exit interview question. I feel in my company we don't get much info out of the exit interview because people aren't 100% honest and don't want to burn bridges on their exit. I feel we never know 100% why someone has left us. Do you think there's any way around this for either of you to answer?
Well, I'll take a quick stab at that, Allison, and I would just say that go back to those questions that we had on the slide, and you'll get it in the slide deck. But the questions, why are you leaving? What led you to look? How did you get that? If there was anything that you could have changed, what would that have been? And be a good listener and make it an open dialogue. Don't make it an adversarial exit interview. Make it really open in a listening environment, non-threatening environment, and usually, unless there's complete animosity, usually you're going to get some good information from the exit interview over time.
Yeah, and I'll pony off that. Again, if it's almost like if you've gotten to the point of an exit interview and that employee doesn't feel comfortable being honest and open, it's one of those, it's probably already too late. It means you likely haven't fostered an environment that encourages transparency and open communication and direct and honest feedback. It probably means that in performance reviews, there's hesitation around, difficult conversations with employees, and it also means that it's probably a culture of managers not getting, direct 360 feedback, be it in person or even anonymously. If you feel like you have a little bit of a broken culture in that sense when it comes to transparency, I would say start with your review process. Ensure that the difficult conversations that your managers and your leaders are coached on how to have those difficult conversations, and to do them with empathy and with compassion. And then conversely, I also would start to set up 360-degree performance reviews that can be anonymous so that people do feel like the company wants that feedback. They're protected and they're not going to be penalized if they are being transparent. And that way, when you get to the point where it is an exit interview, it isn't new behavior. It's learned behavior that the company has sort of fostered, previously.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, it looks like we have time for one more question. I have a question here. When doing succession planning, is this done between managers or do you share this with employees? Do you recommend?
Well,
that's a good question. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
I would just say real quickly that it starts at the top, and then it trickles down through every level of management. And I say that, succession planning is done at every manager level. And it's not, if you share too much with your employees, you're building expectations, and you may be locked into a succession plan that may not pan out for you 6 months from now. So be careful what you share, but I guess the advice is every manager should have a succession plan, and it should be shared with up above them to their management tree above them rather than with the employees.
Yeah, I think I echo that. You know, it's hard to put in blanket statements that say you should always be sharing succession plans with your employees. I do think it's the responsibility of every manager, you know, and every leader throughout an organization to be cognizant and to always have succession planning on their mind. It's the only way that a company can scale and grow. But I agree, Paul, that, you know, sharing that with employees is, you know, really dependent on it's a case-by-case basis. I think it's more important that the manager, you know, invites employees to always keep the manager in the loop with what type of direction they want their career to go, so that the manager can sort of craft that map for them, even if it's behind closed doors.
Yep.
Great. Okay, well, it looks like we just ran out of time. I did get a whole bunch of questions, so I just sent my email address, katie.williams@glassdoor.com. If you have any questions for Paul or Allison, I'll make sure that they get them answered for you. And I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much, Paul and Allison, for speaking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a great day.